Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. We're back with more interviews. Today I'm sitting down with Jon Gusman. His company is called Cauldron of Burgers, which is an awesome name, and his new comic is Quest for Materiality. And I always trip over the name of that, I'm not sure why, but it's a very unique, very cool looking comic, definitely inspired by the era of the 90s cartoons that I know I grew up on and that are important to me. So it's really cool talking to Jon about his inspirations, how he gets it done. This is as indie gets, which is cool because Jon is also in a punk band and was in other bands in his past. And he kind of takes that DIY mentality from the punk scene and brings it into comics where he does all the work. He does all the traditional artwork. He does the writing. He does the whole process. He even prints, staples, packages, and ships it to you. So you could not get more indie than what Jon's doing. And the comic looks great, so I think the results speak for themselves. Enjoy the interview. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Jon Gusman. Cauldron of Burgers is your production company?
Yep.
To talk about your newest comic, Quest for Materiality. It's a bit tough for me to say.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been having this thing happen where, you know, I'm starting to realize that a lot of the titles and things that I guess slap a name on are just like, it's like mental diarrhea that comes from my brain. Like I obviously wouldn't have named it that if I didn't know it was a word, but I had to look it up, and I know that other people, like, it makes sense in my brain, but other people are kind of like, yeah, materiality. Yeah, but yeah, that's the name, and that's the brand new book. It's actually, I got it right here.
Awesome. Okay. It is available now for people listening.
Yeah. It's issue number 1 is out. That dropped a couple weeks ago, and issue number 2 will be out June 2nd. I think that's right. Yeah, it's the right date. That's the problem with being independent is you got to remember things.
Yeah. I feel your pain.
Yeah. So June 2nd, I believe that's the release for number 2. But yeah, number 1 is out in the world, out in the wild, and it's been great.
And it's a 3-parter, correct?
Yeah, 3 parts.
Awesome. Actually, one thing I wanted to touch on, you were talking about the name that you just kind of throw out there, first thing in the top of your mind, whatever. But from what the press release that I got on your comic says, it kind of fits because your comic is a look inside your mind. It's this like cerebral kind of experience.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I guess to even add on to what I was saying before about how like, it's funny hearing other people kind of say these things that I think of and slap a name on. Like, I was actually just at the bank, kind of trying to make this whole thing a little more professional, maybe get like a bank account for it. And the banker was just like, okay, what's the name of the business? I'm like, oh, Cauldron of Burgers. He goes, Cauldron of Burgers. Okay. And I'm like, it's so strange to hear like people just say that like without chuckling or something like that. So even like Quest for Materiality and like Cauldron of Burgers and like all these things that I do. Yeah, I mean, it is really like a peek inside my brain, what's going on. And it's like kind of just like really epic dude humor, you know.
Cauldron of Burgers is a great name too, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually I was listening to a song called A Cauldron of Hate by Cannibal Corpse one day, and I was eating a burger, so Cauldron of Burgers kind of it all just mended together. That's kind of really where my head's at.
That's so much goofier than anything Cannibal Corpse would do.
It's very true.
Before we get further into Quest for Materiality, I always like to take creative people way back to the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm sure you've probably been drawing your whole life. That seems to be a typical artist story. But when did you start drawing? I shouldn't make the assumption.
So I'm a lifelong doodler. Like I spent, especially in my elementary school years and like middle school years, I spent most of my time, I guess, that I was supposed to be doing classwork, I was just drawing Dragon Ball Z with my friends. I was drawing Power Rangers. I was drawing like Beavis and Butthead too, which is a pretty funny one when you're in elementary school. But I think I was on the tail end of the Beavis and Butthead generation. Samurai Jack was another one that was a huge one for me. And even like Quest for Materiality, there's like a humongous amount of Gendy like influence in there. Yes, I was just drawing just on my folders, on my dittos. I had like notebooks next to my bed I would always draw in. And it was just something that I was always doing in my purest form. I had a comic book that I wrote with my friend Taha in 3rd grade that was called The Claw. and it was about this guy who found like the gem of truth and just became this crazy monster because I guess he wasn't a truthful guy and would just go on like a killing spree. I had another comic back in third grade called The Fuzz, and it was about a guy who got an evil haircut and then also went on like a mass killing spree, which I don't know if that's like weirdly prophetic for I guess the years to come, but you know, for some reason I was always drawing about that. But I guess as I got older, I kind of, not that I lost interest in it, but I went on to other things, I guess, as you do as a preteen. But I never lost sight of that. I always loved like cartoons and stuff. I also I have a pretty extensive anime background because you know, when I would see my father, like when he had visitation, he would always take us to Blockbuster, and we'd be like, "Hey, like we want to get these Dragon Ball Z VHS tapes." And I guess this other anime, which was something maybe from like Manga Entertainment, something like Ninja Scroll, or maybe like the Street Fighter animes, or Blood the Last Vampire, like things that were obviously not like, you know, Dragon Ball, like as clean as Dragon Ball Z. But you know, when your dad from Little Neck Queens sees the both of them, he doesn't see the difference. So you know, I had this pretty extensive like anime background, but like I was just always been like, so I always like to use my hands for things. And eventually I got into drums. I got into music when I was a preteen. And eventually that kind of really took over my teen years. But I remember specifically when I was taking my SATs, I actually spent more time drawing on the back of my name tag. And I'm pretty sure I was drawing like a pile of shit. Like I was not drawing like anything really like I should have been taking my SAT. I flunked the SAT, obviously, but I remember that like I spent more time drawing. It was always something that I was doing. It wasn't till I guess I had my real first failure as a musician because I was in like an indie punk band. We got to the starting line of like, okay, now you're gonna start really actually doing shit. And it kind of, as most musician stories go, like it kind of, you know, kind of made a fart noise in the air, crashed and burned to the ground, and whatnot. But so after that, I guess as really as a way to cope, I kind of threw myself back into art, back into drawing. And then eventually, obviously, got back into music too. And the two, especially now in my life, one hand sort of watches the other. But yeah, I'd say probably about the time that I'm 21, 22, I started really taking drawing and illustration seriously to a point where I wanted to start drawing comics. And it wasn't until I guess 2018 was when I put out my first like zine, which was Cauldron of Burgers Volume 1. These lines are mine, and I passed them out to like 10 people at a show. And sort of that's been my life ever since, you know, is just printing things in small quantities and getting better at it each time, you know.
That's awesome. You stuck with it all those years. You never fully let it go, so you were probably growing as an artist, maybe not as quickly as like if you know dedicated work time to it. But
oh yeah, no, it's actually funny because you know, I when I first really started taking things seriously after my super professional band broke up, I joined another band, and at the time I was in the band, I was working like full time, overtime, the whole nine, and I really had no time to draw. I was coming home, I was like too exhausted to get anything out, and even the things that I was drawing, I was obviously just not in a headspace to appreciate. And I realized I'm like, yeah, no, this is something that I really want to take the time to be able to really pursue, you know. And I that band had an opportunity to move to North Carolina, so I moved down with them to a place where like my rent was like $100, and I lived off my savings, and I didn't have a drawing table or anything. I had a little office garbage can that I put on its side, and I literally sat on the floor and I drew for days on end. And that's really where I got my chops as a cartoonist and as an illustrator. Then I guess once the band decided to that band, which I'm still in that band, but they decided to move elsewhere. I was kind of in a position where I wanted to come back to Long Island. I went to school and I just finished my BFA in visual arts. Now that was something really where like that was where I was finally in like a true environment where I can explore. That's where I discovered how much I love painting, and how much I really discovered how I love fine art, you know, as opposed to being just like a comic book artist, you know. Really developed my vision for sure.
I always find the art school idea interesting. You know, I'm nowhere near Arcee or Caliber, so it's definitely speaking without the experience, which, you know, is always the best way to approach something online.
I appreciate the really kind words.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when you went to art school, I always feel like it's either going to be this huge way to expand your mind. Like you said, you got into fine art, you tried mediums you might not have been practicing in on your own. But is there also the double-edged sword where maybe it's like, no, this is the curriculum, this is the path for everybody. It doesn't matter what your interests are.
Yeah, I definitely I struggled with that a bit, but I think my program was a little bit different in that they were trying to get because I think they were trying to sort of get with the times, especially with the amount of digital artists that were coming in. Like I'm definitely not that I can't appreciate digital art or just like digital comics and stuff as a whole, but I'm definitely very much a hands-on, tangible sort of medium sort of guy. I don't like perfection as much as I like things that I feel like I can see someone was there to do. So I think once they saw someone who was really interested in like really physical mediums and more traditional things, they kind of just let me do whatever the fuck I wanted. And like I said, they were trying to sort of get with the times, and so they had a program that more or less made you super well rounded. So it's like I had classes where I was practicing Photoshop, but then there was also classes where I was doing fine art, and then they had the tutorials class, which really is like they kind of let you do whatever you want, and then you have the midterm critique and the final critique. And I always kind of breeze through my final critiques with like flying colors, because not because I really believe I'm some sort of protege or like crazy gifted artist, but I think that really what I was doing was something genuine that I could back up. You know, like there's like I'm not like a hyper realistic kind of guy. Like I think the only thing that really makes my stuff interesting is as a lot of these value shifts, and maybe it's just me taking whatever's coming out of my head and putting it on a piece of paper, but you know it translates, you know. So I think that really set me aside from like the traditional, like you learn about the history, you learn about this, you learn about that, you do all this, and then I guess when you're out of our hair you can go do whatever the fuck you want. You know, it was definitely, it was an interesting experience, and it wasn't really a traditional experience that I've heard other people had at art school, you know.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of people who went to say the Art Institute, not to specifically throw them under the bus, but
Yeah.
they had more of the experience that was like, you're going to learn these things. Well, it has nothing to do with what I want. It doesn't matter. It's a college. We got to hit you for those extra credit hours, so do it. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, definitely. This was, I think if they saw people that didn't have direction, they'd more or less put them through the motions to figure out what they wanted to do. But me, I definitely, especially since I was a little older than everybody there, I had already kind of experienced life and really sort of the dregs of the creative world, the really like no one gives a fuck about you part of the creative world. So I had my ass kicked enough where it's like I was disciplined and knew really more or less what I wanted to do. I actually the first comic that I ever put out through specifically Cauldron of Burgers Press was a comic called The Cosmic Debt, which I did in my, I guess it was the Tutorials 2 class. That was a 40-page comic book that like took up the entire wall. They were kind of like, this is too much work. Like, you know, like you're too dedicated. This is weird. You know?
that's also interesting that you mentioned you were a little bit older. You had already kind of been through the ringer as an artist, like being in a band. I mean, for people who have never been in a band, I mean, I wasn't personally, but I knew a lot of people who were. That is maybe even harder or just as hard as getting an indie comic out there where nobody cares that you exist. You just have to do it and do it and do it till you find your audience.
Yeah.
You know, the record producer, just like, you know, Stan Lee's not going to come knocking on your door saying you got what it takes. Let's go.
Especially nowadays where like everything's so independent. Now it's like, I mean, every industry as far as like what revolves around creativity is kind of scrambling at this point, because it's like no one knows how the fuck to handle the fact that, you know, everybody's got the same resources now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe obviously not the amount of reach, but you know, in due time, if you do work hard enough, you can get somewhere and find an audience that, okay, maybe it's not a humongous audience, but it's a small pocket of people that actually care about what you do. And I think in a lot of ways that's more important than, you know, maybe somebody that buys one of your books and never thinks about you again. You know, I'm working towards the cult status if I can get anywhere. You know.
I think that's where things are now because there's so much access, because anyone can do it. And you do need some artistic merit to even use the digital tools, you
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
luckily. So it gives a lot of people who might not be as naturally gifted a way to express themselves, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But it does kind of also, like, you're not casting into a lake, you're casting into the ocean now.
Yeah. It's definitely you know, especially since like I cut the ribbon on Cauldron of Burgers Press. I realized just how big the ocean is, and it's like obviously I have a little bit of an idea of how to network and kind of get into places that I'd want to be at. And I've already done some things that I'm super proud of, but like those things really are only special to me, and maybe in the grand scheme of things, if someone happens to see what I do, someone important happens to see what I do, never gotten a bad review, but I understand really the magnitude of what the independent world is now, and I think everybody in their own way is sort of independent at this point, even with like people that are working with big two that, might treat it just as seasonal work as opposed to like a full on career. It's crazy to think about, but it's also very exciting because it's like you can kind of go anywhere.
Yeah, we're kind of in this in between shift where what's the next thing, and we're trying to figure that out because even the big two don't seem very stable lately.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially, I guess, like with the pandemic and everything that happened with like Diamond. As far as I've read, I have no real experience with that whatsoever. But I know, I have friends within like that are a little higher up in the industry that really were saying like, yeah, this is no bueno for them for sure, and there's going to be a huge shift and whatever happens, and that's why I'm kind of just like, might as well just do everything myself. At the end of the day, as long as I could find paper, I could just do what I want to do. You know.
That's the real key too, is nobody's going to tell you, hey, this is not exactly what we're looking for. Why don't you change it to this, 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 and this? And you're like, oh, that's not my artistic expression, so why would I?
Exactly. It's definitely a big inspiration for me, despite being super controversial. Is Dave Sim, and because he was somebody who was publishing independently back before there was the internet. He's one of the most successful independent publishers ever. So it's like, just thinking about like he was able to do that, and I forget how many million copies, and I guess was it in the millions, Cerebus? I know that he's worth like somewhere in the millions. I might be getting that wrong too. I haven't done research in a little while, but if he was
Right.
able to do what he did back in a time before the internet, I guess that there's no telling what can happen now. you know, uh,
Yeah, it's I think you just got to stay your course, and the cream rises to the top. I guess that expression's still relevant. So
Yeah, for sure. And that like 2020 was supposed to be the year that I really expected to like hit the ground running. And obviously that didn't really happen. So now it's like kind of weird training wheels back into real life. And I'm expecting by 2022, I'm going to really just like get out there with what I do, like just tabling at as many places as possible. And, just doing that all because that's something I really haven't been able to do just yet. I had a few conventions back before the pandemic, but and that got me really excited about it, because that's also like a huge thing about what I do is I don't think that really digital I guess mediums really or digital interaction does it as much justice as like seeing it with your own eyes or holding it in your hand, so I'm excited about the I guess now that things are starting to open up again, but I guess it's about time.
it definitely is about time. It just in general. But for you, if you hit the ground running kind of in 2018, 2019 was probably like your first. Like 2018, you're probably figuring a lot of things out.
Yeah.
2019, like you said, you just did a few cons and things like that. But I'm sure even that there's a massive learning curve. Like your first one, you were probably like, oh, I didn't even think to bring, that, whatever it was. And
Yeah, no, I definitely like I'm really really thankful in a lot of ways for how 2020 went because obviously, that's not to not recognize all the terrible things that had happened. But on a personal level, just being able to sit in my house and really rethink everything that I was doing, because I wouldn't have thought to really have a separate part of Cauldron of Burgers to be like a publishing company or something like that. It would have just been Cauldron of Burgers slapped on whatever I was doing. And I guess that's still happening, but I wouldn't have really thought about the business aspect of it. I would have just kind of just went and figured it out. But I didn't really get to sit with it and try out different things and see what worked and see what didn't work. And it really was a very reflective and transformative time. So now I definitely have a lot more of a sense of like, if someone asks me about like, what's the comic book about? What's the difference between this part of what you do and this part, what you do? I actually have an answer as opposed to just being like, I don't fucking know, dude.
like I thought it looked cool. I'm just going with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, making the best out of a bad situation, I think, is the healthiest way to describe, people's interactions in 2020. If you were able to,
Yeah.
not to downplay people who just, their lives were turned upside down, completely out of their control.
Oh yeah, 100%. I
But
definitely don't want that to go.
no. For a creative though, I'm sure it was. I don't want to say it's hard to use the word nice, but you had this forced time to sit, and it's like, well, what can I do? I can't go out. I can't go to the movies. I can't go to a restaurant. I can do this. I can draw. I can paint. I can color.
Yeah, I started a podcast. I started a YouTube channel. What else? I mean, I started my publication. I was painting. I was doing zines. I really, because Quest for Materiality actually was one of the first like comic book ideas that I ever thought of, and it really was more or less like it was just one idea of like sort of barbarian girl sees docile cow in the grass, goes to, I guess, hunt it, and then it turns out it's this big fucked up cow monster thing that she has to fight. That turned into an entire 3-issue story, like just from me sitting there and dusting off that idea for trying to figure out like, what am I going to do here? Because I had plans to maybe do like a whole anthology of like every zine that I've done and like put it all together in like sort of a compilation book. And I was going to just put what would turn into Quest for Materiality at the end as sort of just like a surprise, like new exclusive thing. But then I was like, you know what? I think maybe it's better that I just leave a lot of those things where they were. And, maybe if this becomes something I save everything. So it's like, I could always just make some sort of like, I don't know, what do you call that sort of, I guess like an anthology sort of book.
Like an archive book.
Yeah. I could do that sometime in the future, but for now, I think I just need to work on developing my chops as a storyteller and as an artist. And, that last summer, that's when I started really writing this whole thing out. And, I don't know if I would have done that had I not had time to sit with all these ideas and really reevaluate. Like, was that a good one? Did I just kind of throw that out without really even thinking about it? There's so many things that I did that I'm really thankful for that time. But, like I said, it's about time. I'm ready to get back out there and, just talk to people again,
Yeah, well, you've also had all that time to develop the habits. Like you said, you started a YouTube, you started a podcast. So right before we pressed record, you talked about picking up Streamyard, which is this platform we're using, and maybe doing live streams of you doing art, which I think would be huge. I've seen that all over. People love that.
Yeah, no, it's great. I've done a few live streams with a guy named Pete Vasquez. He does something. He's one of two of a thing called Fat Guy Inc. And he has this like live stream show that he does called The Pit with like a bunch of local, and I guess not so local. Well, mostly people from Long Island who are sort of involved in the whole convention scene. Basically, we all just talk about things that go on, and it was really great. It was really inspiring for me. So shout out to Pete for having me or inspiring me to download StreamYard along with you now too. So
awesome. Yeah. So it's good. You can carry those habits forward while we all get to go back out in the world.
Yeah, definitely. Now it's like, fuck, I'm going to be so busy with all these things these seeds that I planted. I don't even know if I'm going to have time to do it, but
took on 5 extra jobs because you had all the time.
Exactly. But I have a ridiculous like reservoir of energy. So I'll put it somewhere and
keep that up. Good. Stay the course.
Yeah, exactly.
So you had your concept for Quest for Materiality, your barbarian woman.
Mm-hmm.
Being the writer, artist, like you're it beginning to end, from concept to print to getting it in someone's hands.
Yeah.
So did you force yourself to follow the more traditional path of like, okay, here's the idea and here's the outline, and now I got a script and then I'm going to break it down by panels? Or did you just kind of feel it out as you went?
I'm somewhere in the middle, because I'll start with like half of a script and then I'm like, this is kind of boring. Let me just draw shit out and see what happens. So I actually did a rough draft, which I thought was going to be the final draft, because that's sort of how I did things beforehand. I was just like, whatever. I finished that up. That's what it's going to be. Okay, it's 15 pages. And then I kind of realized like maybe I should kind of hold off on that. Maybe I should just, sit with it. And then I kind of I guess finally just recognize that maybe I just got to redo these and I could do them better, and I'm gonna make it so it's at least 22 pages, the more traditional comic book thing. So there was a bit of a I try to plan things out now as much as possible so that I'm not doing like thinking while I'm drawing, because with that 40-page comic Cosmic Debt, I was just drawing as I went along. I had no script, I had no nothing, and probably by page 20 I'm like, I am a fucking asshole. Like, why did I do this to myself? But no, I'm somewhere in the middle. Like issue 2 was definitely a lot more thought out before I started drawing, because I actually took a small break from drawing Quest for Materiality so that I could finish up school. I guess during my last semester, I planned out issue 2 and then I just did the semester, took that 16 weeks to just, get it done because it was my last one. I wanted to make sure that I finished strong. And then I set the date for January 4th to start the whole drawing process all over again. And I was really, really regimented with it. So issue 1 was done in like, I think 3 or 4 weeks. And then issue 2, I got done in just about the same time. And then I'm actually like really crawling through issue 3 because of the fact that I realized that like, yeah, like I don't have to be so regimented if I'm not like enjoying it, because I was doing a page a day and then posting the 5 pages to Patreon for both issues 1 and 2. And it like took a toll, because on top of that, I was also drawing another zine for like all my patrons, which was just a cartoon zine. So issue 3, I'm like, man, let me take a step back. Let me kind of just make sure that what I'm doing is what I not that I didn't enjoy the content within for other 2 issues, but I definitely felt that it was taking a mental toll on me. So I'm like, let me just slow down a bit, especially since like the deadlines that I established, it kind of left a little leeway for me to slow down a bit. But I'm glad that at least with the first 2, I was able to plan things out and be as regimented as possible, just to know that I could do it too. Does that answer the question? I kind of went on a
yeah. No, go on all the tangents you want. That's great.
Cool.
It did definitely answer the question too, and it's also an interesting point that you brought up where I was doing a page a day, and it started to just feel like, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of like a chore almost, like you weren't loving what you were doing. Okay. And I heard that from another artist friend of mine, and I never really got it. I thought maybe we were just wired different because it was kind of my only point of direct contact with an artist like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if I write something, I get consumed and I can't put it down until I at least get through a draft, which is probably not always the best way to do. Because then when you reread it, you're like, oh, the ending's really rushed. I really steamrolled that, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I thought the mental fatigue aspect of it was really interesting, especially because it's not that you're not into it. It's not that you don't want to do it. And it's just, I got to finish it because I started.
Yeah, no. And it's cool that you said that, because that's really, I listened to a lot of the Image Comics podcast that they had back a bunch of years ago, probably like 5 years ago or so. I think they stopped doing it, but pretty much when I was like looking for advice on like how to be more professional or how to be, or I guess make your way through being a comic book artist, that basically everyone's the advice they all shared was finish the book. So it's like that for me was like, that stuck in my brain. Like, even if I want to just like bow out for a second, I'm like, no, I got to just finish it. I got to get through it, because I know that once it's over, I'm going to look back at this and be like, oh no, this was awesome. I'm glad I did this. But yeah, I don't know what it is about the really regimented aspect of drawing a page a day that really does get so taxing. I guess it is a lot of work. It's not only like just drawing things out, like you got to think about and you got to be happy with what you're drawing, and it really seems like, yeah, it's only a page a day. It's not that big a deal, but yeah, once you get to that like page 15, you're like, oh man. Do you know what it is too? There's a lot of the mundane shots and the mundane panels that aren't just like full on action that I think really get to you too. Like, I don't want to just draw 2 people standing there. I want them to be beating the living shit out of each other, or jumping over bullets, or doing, you know what I'm saying. But
yeah, or you get stuck where you got to do intricate backgrounds.
Yeah, it's like, I don't even want to do that. I really, my thing is like, I just want to hold the whole thing in my hands. I want to be able to say that it's done. And I guess when you're just like sitting there day to day and like slowly chipping away at it, it gets to you, and obviously I wouldn't trade it for anything else. I just wish that it felt a little better. Like once, it's that last 10%, But that really took its toll after issue 2 for me, and I was like, "Yeah, I definitely gotta take a break for a second," because between everything that I did, I also do a weekly comic strip with a guy named Pat Kinlan, who he's done, like, We Can Never Go Home, he's had, Patience, Conviction, Revenge. He's like a pretty well-established guy, within the industry. We do a comic strip together, and that's 3 panels a week, which I guess every month is about a page. So it's like between all of those things, I had done probably about 70 pages in like 2 months. And I'm like, yeah, that was I don't know what I was thinking there. But
Yeah, you gotta just be like waking up and drawing while you're brushing your teeth.
yeah, but basically that's where I was at, my girlfriend was kind of like, yeah, you could afford to slow down a little bit, like you don't have to just keep going and going. I'm like, no, I gotta keep going, I gotta keep going. Um, but yeah, no, I'm definitely trying to be a little bit better about planning and what's I guess regiment is sort of the word of this question that I guess I'm going with, but a little more
Yeah.
regimented, even just because now like I'm in the middle of drawing issue 3. I'm in the middle of printing orders for issue 1, and I'm in the middle of formatting books for book, or I guess formatting the what I'm going to print for book 2, which is going to be dropping in a couple weeks. So I'm just like, maybe next time around, I gotta finish the entire thing before I even think about printing or formatting or whatever. But I guess that's also part of the learning process of being sort of an independent kind of guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And your head's always in different stories or different modes, and you probably get up and you have this like daunting task list, but it's like, okay, well, what do I do? And do you find yourself that you kind of have maybe like a safety net that's also like constructive procrastination? Like, I have to format, I have to talk to the printer, I have to add it to the website, I have to do this press release. I'm just going to draw this page. I got to do it anyway.
Yeah, I print everything myself too, especially for this. It's like everything that I do is just in my room. So
Oh,
that,
you
that
literally have a printer that you're.
yeah. I'm the judge. I'm the jury. I'm everything. So, there's a bit of a quality. Like I guess, like obviously, if I were to go to a printer, there would be a quality jump. But I think with what I do, also the sort of I guess. I don't know. I don't want to call it less quality, but there's definitely a difference between like maybe a more professionally printed book and my books. It's definitely a lot more of a zine DIY style, but I think I sort of like it that way because, and also at the same time, it's like cost of printing is not cheap. And if I can go down to 75 cents a book, which is what I pay when I print everything myself, as opposed to upwards of $1 to $3 a book, I would rather go with that, and just sell something with a little more character. I forgot the question you initially asked me, but
No, that's also interesting and something that I want to ask about. So don't worry about it. I originally had asked if you find yourself looking at your task list and you maybe have like a safety, like I use drawing a page as an example. Like if that's the core thing you want to do, it's probably the most fun part of it. So you
yeah.
kind of put off the printing and put off the writing or put off the formatting when you maybe shouldn't, but you're still getting something done.
Well, I definitely I spend a good amount of time driving around, drinking my coffee. I meditate once a day. I do things to just clear my head and try and figure out what's the most important thing. Definitely, like if I feel I have to draw a book by a certain time, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to draw, and maybe any residual energy I have by the end of the day, I'll spend formatting or printing or researching or something like that. I'll go to the store and maybe buy some supplies or whatever. But no matter what, I'm definitely always doing a bunch of different things during the day. And it's like I usually my philosophy is as long as I get a page done, or I guess at that point it was as long as I get a page done a day, I'm good. I could do whatever else. But now it's sort of like I guess now, like with the orders that are coming in and stuff, it's like I got to get those out by a certain point. I know that, and I know that the deadline for, or my personal deadline for number 3, is a ways away and in a kind of a reasonable amount of time. So it's like as long as I do something for each page every single day, even if it's penciling and then kind of get into inking later, because inking for me is not like this super. It's a pretty sloppy process. It's not really super accurate or intricate, or I'm spacing on the right word, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
There's definitely a little bit of room for artistic uh flow and whatever. It's very oh, I'm losing it. I'm losing the word. But anyway, I think you know what I'm
I
trying to
see
say.
what you're getting at just by having seen your artwork. It's like doesn't need to be this clinical straight line right angle kind of like it more
Yeah.
just flows with the feeling of the page.
Rhythmic and kinetic is more or less what I go for, as opposed to like perfect. And but yeah, like I said, I definitely try and make sure that if I'm not doing keeping things super stock with how I have been doing them, I make sure that I'm still getting the same amount of stuff done, or it just maybe in a different way, so yeah, like I said, now this book, this most recent one, has been a lot more of like, as long as I at least pencil it and have like the foundations done, I can work out all the other stuff at a different time and then post it at a certain time. And my patrons are pretty understanding. So I think they're just happy to see stuff when I get it out, because I think most people that know me, even on a semi-personal level, know that I'm always, if I'm not doing one thing, I'm doing another thing. So no matter what, they're getting something from me each week.
Yeah, you're not disappearing for 8 months, not touching your art, and then coming back and like, oh yeah, I promised a book, I'll do it.
Exactly. Like they know that it's like, this is all I'm doing. And it's like, even if it's not okay, there's no comic stuff coming out. Maybe there's some art shit coming out. There's a podcast coming out. There's some sort of YouTube video coming out. There's some sort of record that I'm working on, maybe some footage about that. And, I'm a pretty busy guy. So like I think there's a level of understanding when people, when it comes to me, I would hope so anyway.
Right. It's gonna have to be.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
with your printing process, do you mind if I ask a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah, no, because this was in some ways a nightmare, but in a lot of ways a nice achievement afterwards.
How much research did you have to do on what kind of printer, what kind of inks, what kind of paper, how to bind it?
So that's the whole putting it together process I figured out pretty early on, like with zines, like the whole saddle stitching thing, and that, or more or less the middle staple. Bookbinding, I actually was doing a lot of experimentation with over the summer. And it's like when I was thinking about doing sort of the anthology book, I was going to print everything and then just put them together myself and maybe do like a small run of like 50 to maybe 100. I guess however much the bottle of wood glue would permit me. But yeah, so with this, it was relatively simple. Because I have a printer, and it's a nice printer. It's a HP like Office 7740 or something like that. It's a really nice like high definition printer. There's definitely a learning curve though when it comes to that, especially with I guess duplex printing. That's probably what the biggest struggle was with printing this first run of number one was I had printed really only zines out of there with 8.5 by 11 paper, but with the 11 by 17 paper, with the duplex printing, there was like an offset. Like it kept like when it would bring it back into the machine, it would be offset by like 5/8 of an inch. So I had to measure that out, figure out which side to cut it from, and put it back in the printer, and then print it so both sides were aligned perfectly. So it took a lot of time. I definitely killed at least one tree. Sorry, but it was worth it. But yeah, like those are like things that, especially when you're doing things yourself, that in a lot of ways you don't expect, because you think you have everything sort of figured out, or you have a way that works for you that might not be the easiest way, but it's probably just the way that you can kind of just shut your brain off and just do and crank out a bunch of books. But there's always going to be something that kind of challenges you and puts you back in a place where it's like, oh, now I have to learn and figure this out again. um but yeah, I did research on paper. I did research on because there's a different paper from on the cover of the book than there is on the inside of the book. And then so that was definitely a bit of a learning curve too, because it's like the poundage of the paper matters, especially if you don't want a certain level of transparency, or you don't want a certain level of transparency rather, because especially when it comes to like copy paper, there is it's you can get away with it, but it's not the best quality you could possibly be. And when you're trying to I guess find like wholesale paper people, especially on Long Island, they're weirdly like secretive and weirdly cryptic about where to get like paper that isn't Staples paper. Like you really got to ask around. Somebody's got a monopoly on something. They paid people to kind of hush about that, because I called a bunch of different places and they're like, no, we don't just sell like boxes. You have to buy it in like crazy quantities. I'm like, well, what the fuck? Just give me a box. I don't
Yeah,
even know
you
how
have it.
it's crazy. But yeah, there's a lot of things that go into the just printing yourself too. And like I said, I'm somebody that like, I don't want to have to rely on anybody. I don't want to pay somebody else's cost of labor, especially when I'm willing to do the labor.
Mhm.
And at a certain point you get a product that, okay, maybe it's not like super like the highest quality it could possibly be, but it is a quality that shows that you were there and you made it. And I think in a lot of ways, I think people might appreciate that more. It's a more personal experience all around.
Yeah, it sounds like you're taking a lot of stuff from the DIY punk world that you were
Oh
in
yeah.
or are in, and bringing it into the DIY art world.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I like that whole period of my life that obviously I'm still in. Really, it opened a lot of doors for me, because I definitely have the mentality of just do it yourself and figure it out. And, most people, unless they're kind of a dick, don't really care about all the little nuances and quality and stuff like that. In fact, if you can work your way up to a point where you can make professional quality yourself, I think that goes miles ahead of maybe just like subbing it out to somebody. Not to say that, I understand that most people just like would rather have maybe someone that's more equipped to do that sort of thing. And I totally respect that. I wish that I had that part of my brain that would just like let people do things for me. But for me personally, it's like, yeah, like I'm slowly working my way up to um certainly a quality that, I could say that I achieved just from sheer hard work.
Yeah, and the fact that you can say literally like this book is me.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
don't outsource the lettering, I don't outsource the printing, I ship it from where I live. Like it's all
Yeah,
you.
yeah, and what's funny too is that like especially in doing research of like paper quality and all these things, like I found that there's some pretty nice copy paper that actually just works. And I've literally sat there with like graphic novels and like the paper that I have, and I like was doing this with it. I'm like, yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing. I think that whatever, maybe there is something to this. But yeah, like everything that I do is all internal. It's all me. And it's just I think that it's just I wouldn't have it any other way. And it's nice to see I guess like me fulfilling my own definition of success, which is really just getting to a place where you weren't before, where it's like, okay, I used to have to hand out my zines, and now I'm selling double what on the opening week that I would have handed out at a show or something like that for free. So it's pretty cool. You have all these personal goals. Like I've sold out of small runs before, and that for me was like, yeah, it might have been 50 copies, but even so, that's 50 people that have my book. Like
Yeah.
like things like that, where it's like I definitely am a lot more of a fulfillment guy than I am like I maybe just not a fulfillment guy. I can't really think of the right word right now, but yeah.
Right. No, I totally get where you're coming from. It's really cool. It's very inspiring for anyone, I would think, who wants to be a creator or is a creator, especially wants to be, because I feel like while there is so much more access to anything, whether you want to make a movie, you want to make comics, you just write a novel, no picture, whatever you want to do, it seems like the technology is there to do it, but it also can feel really daunting. Like, where do I start?
It's almost like how when we used to, I guess the way we consumed music back maybe even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you were going to download stuff, you knew exactly what you wanted to get and get your hands on and stuff. Or maybe you'd go to a CD store and you okay, if something wasn't in stock, you were kind of bummed out, but if you had it, you knew exactly what you were getting. Like, this is what I want. Now with streaming services, it's like you have that search bar and you're kind of just like, well, what the fuck do I listen to? It's sort of the same thing where it's like, I feel like with the internet, it poses that challenge. Is like, well, I could do anything. So what should I do? As opposed to like, okay, well, I know exactly what I want and I'm going to go after it because I have to seek it out. Now everything's at my disposal and it's kind of just like, is it even worth or you know what I'm trying to say here. Like,
yeah, no, exactly.
It's crazy. It's crazy to think about, like, that's how our brains are wired now that we're kind of moving towards this tailored experience, you know?
I'm kind of crippled by choice.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely the best way to put it.
And you could probably speak really well to this, but there's probably things along the way, like just take the printing, for example, where maybe before you started doing your comic, if you thought, okay, I'm going to come up with the idea, then I'm going to write it, then I'm going to pencil it, then I'm going to ink it, then I'm going to buy a printer, do research on paper, print that out. Oh, I need a different paper for the cover. Like if you laid out all these steps before you're like, I'm going to draw a comic, you might have scared yourself off from at least part of it.
Yeah.
Like maybe you would have just paid the printer $3 for the book and they make more on it than you do, even though you did all the work.
Yeah, no, exactly. You know, it's kind of one of those things. Yeah, you just got to throw yourself into it blindly and then, you know, figure out what works and what doesn't later, you know. That's really been the most effective way of really getting things done, is just like, yeah, all right, I'm going, and I guess what I'll figure out what works and what doesn't. It's sort of like fixing your perception of the way you choose I guess moving forward, you know, like just by looking back, you know, by reflecting. There you go, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, there you go. You've given a lot of really good advice during this whole conversation, but if there was one key thing, maybe you've already gotten to it, but if there's one key thing you could go back and tell yourself right at the beginning of your journey, what would that be? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no. I'm thinking of a good answer here, because there is a few things, you know. I think really just, you know, preparation is so key to that sort of thing. Basically, what I would do is just, or tell myself back at the beginning, is just like, you know, obviously have fun with it, and make sure that it's enjoyable, and don't prepare to a point where you scare yourself, but make sure, you know, you kind of have an idea of where you want to go before you start doing it. You know, and also just keep an open mind about what you want to be, because like I said, I started out as just, I wanted to make cartoons and just comic strips and little tiny things. I honestly, okay, no, I'm gonna add on to that, because I wanted to be like a Craig Gleason or something like that, or like somebody that just, like, you know, puts stuff on Instagram and people just buy prints and stuff like that, and I just like little goofy things. And like, I think what I should have said at the beginning is that the internet is not real. It's not a real place, and that don't endear yourself too much to the internet. But also, as far as your own process, yes, be prepared, or try and maintain some level of preparation before you do things. You don't have to just like make this is a difficult question, actually. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just realizing that I'm sort of contradicting what we were saying in the last question, but I think that, you know, it's sort of understandable. Like, you do need some level of prep. You don't have to have everything like super mapped out, but there is a certain level of preparation that you should do and you should know. And also be patient. Be patient with what you're doing, and don't, you know, because of don't take the internet as law, and don't compare yourself to other people on the internet just because they may seemingly be in a better place than you are. Okay, that really tied it all together, as like I wanted it to. But
no, that's great. Well, John, I really appreciate you taking the time. I don't want to eat up your entire day. It sounds like you have a million things to get on to.
Yeah, well, this was priority number one today, so I knew going into this that this is what I was doing. So
awesome, I appreciate that. I appreciate you giving us a look into your process, into your art, and it's cool how far you've already come. And it sounds like you're really laying a strong foundation to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing my best. So the fact that you recognize it's like music to my ears. I really appreciate that.
Definitely, anytime. And keep us in mind for, you know, when issue 3 is coming out. If you want to do it again, we can talk about all new things.
Oh yeah, no, we could actually talk about the story without me going on a crazy tangent about it.
No, that's great. I mean, yeah, I know we didn't talk about Quest for Materiality 2 specifically, but I thought it was kind of cool just to talk and get to know your process and get to know your world.
Yeah, no, I definitely love talking about my process and my world. That's why I do it. So, all
Excellent. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
right, man. Cool. Talk to you later.
I'd like to thank John one more time for coming on the show to talk to me about Quest for Materiality. Check it out online. I'm going to put a link down in the description. Also, look out Cauldron of Burgers for more of John's work. We have more interviews, more new movie coverage, more comic creator interviews, more of everything coming your way, so make sure you like and subscribe. You're not going to want to miss out. Also, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week, wherever you get your podcasts. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, merchandise, and more. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. We love hearing feedback. Drop something in the comment, leave us something on social media. All of our accounts will be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comic series out. It's called Social Studies. You can get it at socialstudiescomic.com. It's a slice-of-life comedy comic about the high school experience, all the ridiculousness that goes along with it, and we skew it all through the prism of the 90s cartoons, once again, that we grew up on and love. Once again, the website is socialstudiescomic.com. 6 issues available now. More to come. Check it out.